What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to YGOPD and the second episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 365. This is where I bring you with me on my journey to kind of reach the next level of competitive play. I'd mentioned there are a few bigger events that I want to go ahead and travel to and kind of use and specifically grind with Rescue Ace throughout this time, and this is going to be one of them. We're getting up a little earlier today, around 5 or so in the morning, and we are traveling to the Kentucky Regional, a little out past Louisville, to a huge store called Through the Decades. Never been there. Really cool store. Was definitely a neat place. Gives a lot of bigger OTS quite the run for their money. If you're in the area and you've never traveled there, I really recommend popping by. It's quite cool. But like I said, I am really committed on grinding Rescue Ace through the next few events. We did okay with our pulls as we were opening up for the day. Nothing too special. Hit an E Pearly Noir. Not too bad, but we'll go ahead and run the day, and then I will go ahead and come back and share the results. Okay, and we're back. I have a few timestamps up on the screen just to give you a little bit of a breakdown of what's going to happen here. I'm going to talk a bit about the rounds and the matchups, as well as the breakdown of the overall event, the deck I played, the main extra in the side, and then at the end, a little bit about different things that I had learned and taken away using this deck at my first full-on kind of regional in quite a long time. I haven't been to a full-fledged regional where I've just played out the full event in about a year. Didn't do as well as I wanted to. Quite a piss poor performance in a lot of ways, but regardless, it felt good. I don't know if it's hard to explain, but after COVID and all that stuff, to just get back in and just play a full 8 straight rounds nonstop, going to travel to an event and just get that experience felt really, really good. So I was really happy with that, and I think it can go nowhere but up from here. So I'll go ahead and showcase a little bit about the matchups, the breakdown of that, and then we'll hop into the deck. Okay, so for the breakdown of the total event, there were 252 players, a little bit smaller than the Ohio Regionals. Usually we get closer to 400 folks, but 252 players, 8 rounds, and top 32 received their invite. My overall record was 5 wins and 3 losses. Was doing really well, was at table 11 and X1 going into round 6 actually, and had 2 just really awful matches where I just drew terribly and shoved me to X3 kind of near the tail end of the event. So it was really unfortunate to have that downward spiral. But I'll talk about the matchups here. Of course, you'll see them on screen, but I'll just take a second to highlight each one of them. Round 1 was Marincess. I started off at the very last table 126 to get to that 252 player. Out of the overall day 2 for die rolls, you've seen that. I went 4-4. I lost die rolls the first half of the day and won die rolls the second half of the day, which was just weird because the ones I won for die roll wise, I was just drawing terribly, so it just didn't matter. But Marincess, we lost in game 3 simply just because he drew well and I drew 2 Preventer, 1 Turbulence, and no other names. And sometimes that's Rescue Ace. Sometimes you just draw all the big boys and no way to play him. And he was on a really weird build. I'm a big fan of Marincess, but I Trisbania'd his board, and for some reason he mained 2 Field Spell. Never seen that before, and for some reason that pushed him over the edge a little bit. So shout out to that guy. He didn't end up doing too well. I think he finished X4, but I really just enjoy seeing Marincess in the format whenever I can. Game 2 was Unchained, 2-1, nothing really special to say about that. The mirror match was my first time having the mirror at a bigger event. That was an easy 2-0. Shout out to my boy Sonny. Again, that's just because him and I have been grinding the mirror match for like a month straight now. That guy wasn't really confident, I think, with his deck. Round 4 was Runic Chimera. That was a 2-1. I thought that deck was actually really cool. I like the synergy with that, between that, Patchwork, and the Chimera engine. If Runic doesn't get hit on the ban list, that is an idea worth exploring that I definitely want to showcase on the channel. Round 5 was my first real, I think, meta of the day. I played my first cash. That was an easy 2-1 for me. That guy had no clue how to play Rescue Ace. One of those things where I set up a full board. He just summoned his cash name after adding Lance off of Prosperity for whatever reason. I just Preventer booked and he passed. So there's a lot of things where people I still don't think are really respecting Rescue Ace as a deck. So round 6, I played against Labyrinth. That was probably one of my worst matches. I went 1-2. Somehow I even won a game when like all 3 matches I just drew 2 ofs like every game out of that round. I just don't get it. But game 3, he just had the full stones. He had both furnitures, actually all 3 furnitures, plus like some discard and then the way to get to Eradicator. So it was just a wrap from there. Round 7, got me really kind of frustrated because it was, again, just kind of bricky hands. And the Minidium player that I played in round 7 just, I would say, opened the God hands, opened every powerful one of or power spell you could ask for both games. Terraforming, Called By, Harpy's Feather Duster, Tactics. It was just crazy. So shout out to that guy, I guess. And then round 8 was actually my most fun and interactive and intense game of the entire event. It was against Pearly. He was our game 1, I think, lasted like maybe 42 of the 45 minutes that I finally got. There was a card that I swapped out the day before the regional that was in the extra deck that I'll showcase that really just cinched that up for me. That was really, really nice. But he wasn't really, I think, too sure on how to interact with Rescue Ace, because I do think in the long run, Pearly, if you don't have the field spell in rotation for Rescue Ace, does have a much better grind game, maybe even with or without that. But he just, I don't think, had a full understanding of the matchup, and that really did give me the edge. So overall, like I said, 5-3, 4-4 on die rolls. Not too bad, but a lot less meta than what I expected. I truly prepared for Cash Lab, Pearly, and Dragon Link, and I saw like 3 out of my 8 rounds were those relevant decks. The other 5 were kind of rogue and random things out there, which sometimes I think can play against you. So that was it for the matchups. I'll go ahead and talk about the main, extra, and side deck, and then just some of my key takeaways from the day. Okay, for the main deck, I'm not going to explain things too much unless things are a little bit odd, only because I've showcased this deck quite a bit. I know people are probably fatigued from this, but I'm just really passionate about this deck. I like showcasing it. At the end of the day, I just really want to showcase stuff I know I think I'll be able to articulate well on the channel. So 3 Airlifter, 3 Hydrant, that is also pretty standard there. And then 3 Impulse. I am still on 3 Impulse. I know some people back and forth on this. Some people change this. 3 Impulse and 1 Engine is fine for me. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the takeaways, but I did not miss Fire Attacker at all the entire day. There was never a decision where I wanted to do that. I would just, if I hard open the engine, I would just Impulse, still get a card like Preventer or Hydrant, and then special summon the engine and still feel fine. I just never had a need for Fire Attacker. I never wanted it, never desired it. This engine was great all day. My gut instinct of how I'd been playing more felt really good to basically get that and engine, and then search Rescue when engine gets the Airlifter out. And then you can just make Donner, Beta Negate, and then Rescue, bring back Airlifter, and keep playing on your turn. 2 Turbulence. This card was insane. The other effect to pop, if your card on your field, another card leaves by your opponent's card effect, came up, I would say, at least half of my matches, where it never came up in testing before, but it was just something where strategically using Emergency or Rescue or even Preventer's effect to bring this guy back as a way to kind of help trade properly on the board felt really good. So if you haven't used that hidden effect of Turbulence, definitely do that. It was really, really great. After that, 2 Preventer. Again, this is fine. I think in a world where cash goes away, it might be even reasonable to consider 1 Turbulence and 3 Preventer. But it's really good. But again, you don't want to brick on the big names. So for now, 5 total big boys is fine with me. The 2 Turbulence, the 2 Preventer, and the 1 Engine. After that, 3 Emergency. Best card. Nothing really needs to be said about this. This is the Emergency Teleport. 1 Alert and 1 Rescue. Again, pretty straightforward with that. And then the 1 Contain and the 1 Extinguish. That's it for the Rescue Ace package. I think overall still a fairly standard setup there. After that, for the non-engine, we are on Triple Pot of Prosperity. If you have it, you need to play it, at least until Diabellstar comes out. I think this could reasonably be cut once that comes out. I'm not sure yet, but just because of the built-in draw in that engine and how consistent that package already is, you may not need it, or you may be able to do both, but the Diabellstar stuff is an extra 5 slots, I believe, compared to this just being the 3 itself. Of course, some people are clamoring for this to get hit. I don't necessarily think so, but just in case, keep your eye on the Diabellstar stuff on the horizon. And the 1 Rhoda. And then we were on, again, the Regulus package. I've been a fan of this, but throughout more and more testing, and also maybe too just my own bad luck, I drew this card all the time, and a couple times it was great, but more so it was just annoying to have it in hand as opposed to searching it out later in engine. I also think there were a few players that truly talked about your end board should just be, at this point, a really good end board is just your set 4 with like Sunlight Wolf and IP under it, and I'm starting to understand why. I truly think that you may not need to dedicate as many resources to doing either the IP line, the Regulus line, or the Cybers combo. I think the deck itself just does enough, and I might even just cut Regulus and try the deck more in kind of that pure essence of what I'm kind of describing there. After that, for hand traps, The only hand trap we played was 3 Ash. I did not miss Droll at all. The Mannadium match was the only time Droll was relevant, and even then their hand was so broken every time that even taking Called By or Talents out of the factor, they had enough extenders where it wouldn't have mattered. And I think most decks are playing around it properly, like Pearly was. Labyrinth, obviously, that's not a really thing to any worry about. Rescue Ace plays around it. Most decks do, so you don't need Droll. The only card I really wish I had was 3 more copies of Ash. I kind of wish I had 6. That kind of came up throughout the entire day, as I just wish I had another card that did almost the exact same thing as Ash. So, but yeah, 3 Ash is fine. 3 Fenrir. I am going to cut this at least back down to 2 for whatever reason. I did not see this card all day. Like, I think I only saw it in my Pearly matchup, and that was good to help clear clear the street, to make things be able to be targeted, that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I just never saw it, and I needed stuff to side out, and I almost sided out Fenrir almost every time for just other better non-engine. I just wanted more things that kind of stopped my opponent in those game 2 and 3s rather than just opening the Fenrir, but I just didn't see it a lot. And so at 2, I saw it a lot. So it might just be one of those things where for me, 2 is the right number. But yeah, it was okay. But I think if you have them right now, you should still run them. Still a great card. Does hard win games on the own. 2 talents, I think this was correct. I was really happy with the ratio specifically of 2 talents, 2 Book of Moon, and 1 Called By specifically. I wanted at least 5 ways, quote unquote, to either dodge and or compensate for and or play through hand traps in the deck. Book came up quite a bit, more so in protecting my own stuff than it ever was as an interruption to my opponent. But between those 5, I felt really, really comfortable, and it felt nice just seeing a combination of those as more so power spells than anything. And then the last 3 slots in the deck, I tried something different. This was really good in testing leading up to it. I played 1 Instant Fusion and then 2 Evenly. I was originally playing, I forget, I think it was Super Poly, but I was just stretched on extra deck space and didn't have the what I felt were the correct number of slots in the extra deck to justify playing Super Poly. So I just decided to cut that entirely and just go back to the board breaker of Evenly. This is going to be cut. I just think for some reason at 2, I'm not seeing this as much as I really should be, probably because it's at 2. But I really want to replace that with something else. Instant Fusion was actually solid every now and then throughout the day. You're typically making either Thousand Eyes Restrict to take something or bait out a negate and then turning into Anima, which is powerful. And then on top of that, you can also make a hard make Mud Dragon to make itself fire to help insulate your board. And it's also a free level 4 for going through that Regulus line. So the logic behind this was solid. I do think I would still keep an Instant Fusion, but I think potentially the 1 Fenrir and the 2 Evenly Matched and even maybe the 1 Regulus might be cut for a few other slots. But that's the main deck, a clean 40 cards. I'll go ahead and showcase the extra deck here. Starting off with the bigger Link 4s and working our way down. 1 access code, and then I cut an Apollousa kind of last minute, maybe a day or 2 before, for Avramax. My logic going into this was decks like Cash and Pearly, not necessarily Lab because they play like Karma Cannon and stuff like that, but there's a good chunk of decks right now that if you make this with an IP, they just don't really have a good out to it. And if they even have an out to it, they're wasting way too many resources to get around it. And that was how I beat Pearly. My last round of the event was I dedicated the last of my resources into making an Avramax that was protected with IP. They basically had to Xyz, crash into it, go into main phase 2, Xyz again, climb up into Zeus, use Zeus to wipe everything, then Avramax clears the Zeus, and then they just pass because obviously their stuff got removed by their own effect. My friend's not there, Street's not there, and then we just Fenrir cleaned it up. So I really think this is a solid card that you should consider. I do like it quite a bit. And then the extra deck, 1 Unicorn, 1 Trisbania. This is in here for Eradicator and also for Lab. The Eradicator stuff came up a little bit, as well as the effect of it itself came up for Marincess and a couple other random matchups. But the problem with this card is you just have to be careful when you're using it outside of the Eradicator kind of thing, because it is mandatory, and I don't believe it's a once per turn in any way, so you could just use it, and then your opponent could also trigger it and wipe your own stuff, so you just have to be careful with this. I'm still iffy on it, but I think it's kind of necessary, at least while the deck can abuse Eradicator, it's just good. 1 Sunlight Wolf, 1 IP, not much needs to be said about there, best end board. 1 Donner, again for how I kind of play the deck, and is just a solid tech choice. Hida, 1 Puzzle Amino, again for the Regulus stuff that can probably be cut, since I might cut that. Same thing with the Sargus and the Merrymaker. And then after that, the 1 Link Karibo and the 1 Anima. And then lastly, one Mud Dragon and one Thousand Eyes Restrict. I think ultimately the one thing I would change about this that I'll talk in a little bit about more is just the Link Karibo. I would much rather play a Salamangreat Almirage because I didn't have that fire. Like just at least half of my matches in like all my games, I was opening Hydrant as my only starter, and that just felt terrible. To not be able to do Almirage, get Preventer, to do the Sunlight Wolf play, to at least add back as part of that, since I was making my first Xyz, or first Link, sorry, as a dark as opposed to a fire. So I would definitely change that for Almirage. I don't think you need to even play all three. Some people play this, and Almirage, but I think you could just get away with one and one of your choice. This card, I animated probably once or twice a match. For people who just, I guess, don't see this come up, I think you're just playing people who are objectively way better than the people I end up playing. But the amount of people that play into the Anima Zone is insane. This card is probably, and will always be, for as long as I play this deck, the MVP of the extra deck, hands down. But that's it for the extra deck. After that, I'll just run through the quick side deck real quick. We got, for the only, I think, main hand trap in the side deck, 3 Ghost Spell. This came up a lot against mainly Labyrinth and a couple other random decks here, sometimes with Rescue Ace with like Rescue and Alert and stuff like that. But overall, Lab, and anytime I sided this card in, it was just good. Objectively good. Felt better than Bystials because it can just chain block. It's not dependent on your opponent having a monster. It was just good. The God combo of my side choice for going first instead of Judgment, I was on 3 D-Barrier and 3 Eradicator, because Eradicator still gets rid of cards like Lightning Storm. Evenly, you see their hand, you can play around it. This was incredible. 2 Kurikara and 1 Herald of the Abyss for the spot removals. I sided this in a lot. Cash for Pearly, things like that. Just didn't really see it. Not really sure why, but just kind of happened that way. And then we decided something a little bit different for diversity. We did 1 Thrust, we did 1 Duster, and 1 Lightning Storm. I just like this idea of switching more to normal spells, since Thrust synergizes with it, gives you more names, gets you that more ability to change targets, things like that. But at the end of the day, these should just be Cosmics. My original gut kind of choice was Cosmic, and I changed that, and I really shouldn't have, even if it's not great to just be able to do something like chain blocking Lab so they don't guarantee can set another trap and stuff like that was really, really important. So that's the main, the extra, and the side. I'll go ahead and just talk a little bit about just some of the general things I learned that I talked and briefly mentioned in the deck. Okay, and just a quick few key takeaways for anyone who is just like, regardless of your performance, I just want to know that based on you running this deck at a major event for 8 rounds nonstop against more relevant things outside of locals, what did you learn? This is for me, what I learned, that Almirage is a necessary component in the extra deck as a Link 1 monster. I think you don't necessarily need Link Karibo. I think you could swap it out or just play it in addition if you have the free slots. The Link Karibo Tribute Hydrant as a dodge never came up for me and was never relevant. I never missed the field spell whatsoever in the main deck. I know that's probably the biggest point of contention, is I was siding it, but with my luck, I always drew it as just a brick and never other cards to pair with it. And it was just, even on turn 1, beyond turn 1, I just never really wanted to search the field spell. I'd rather just search another copy of Emergency or things to just push a little bit more and just get the game cleaned up. I never went into a game that was grindy enough where I still wanted the field spell. Even with my Pearly match that went about like almost the full 45 minutes just for a single round, I just never had a desire for it. So that's another takeaway for the other piece of the extra deck. Sunlight Wolf IP, I think, is just the ideal end board moving forward. I really do think it's solid. I do think that's probably the way to go, at least until the Diabell Star comes out in about, maybe a month and a half to 2 months from now. So I think that's probably the way to go. Also, Almirage being able to make this a lot easier is just super important, and I cannot understate that. I think I probably would have gone closer to maybe at least X2, if not X1, if since almost all my matches I open Hydrant all the time, if I just had the ability to switch into Almirage instead to get Sunlight Wolf to make those hands that are awkward, like just find that has follow-up and still has some kind of board presence, instead of making something really awkward with like Hida and IP and just makes it just not fun to play. So Avramax, insane card. I definitely think this is a Link 4 that is worth exploring in the deck. Apollousa is a really solid card. I still think you could keep it if you want, but just the versatility of Avramax that it has is really great, even under random stuff like Dark Ruler No More. Even if they clear it, right, it clears something else back in retaliation. So it's just a really great card. In some decks, it just cannot be outed without them either dedicating everything into it or without just going next game. That's how they out it. So I think the couple things to mention in terms of the main deck is, like I said, along with Almirage, is I personally don't think I had a good enough understanding of the best ways to truly utilize Hydrant as your only starter. I talked a bit about the Cyberse combo back when I first showcased the deck on how you can make a 2-material Apo or different random things like that. And it might even be worth sticking a couple Cyberse things in the extra and going that direction just to make Hydrant a little bit better. But I'm not a big fan of the Cyberse stuff, but if that's the necessary evil, that's the necessary evil. But I think the big important thing to truly understand is your 1-card Hydrant combos. I think that's going to come up a lot more than what you realize. At least it definitely did for me. And that means no extenders, no extra names, no nothing. So if you're going first, your opponent doesn't have any hand traps. How do you use Hydrant to the best of the ability? Regulus. Most decks, most games are going to be interactive to the point where you're not going to be able to make Puzzle Amino into Sargus, into Regulus, into then Apo and the full combo. That almost rarely came up, never came up for me actually in all my 8 rounds. So I think you have to just plan on that. So I think I would rather cut Regulus for something else, or just change up the extra deck and main the 1 Regulus as just maining the 1 Regulus. It truly depends. Maybe this is a small world bridge, something like that. But I don't think the Puzzle Amino stuff is absolutely necessary unless you truly are focusing for something like the Ibly lock. And even then, some players I know typically side that even more than main it. So I would like to say that if you're on this, you may not have to be. So just consider that. And then the last thing is the engine. Like I said before, engine is really solid. I never missed the field spell. I never missed Fire Attacker. Impulse into engine, into Airlifter, into rescue, and then into Donner, and then rescue back into Airlifter was like my go-to line every time. It was amazing. Even when you hard draw engine, still using Impulse to get something like Preventer instead, or Hydrant to then special the engine, and then you can just book whatever they get out. Typically Hydrant, because then you're gonna, it's really great. So you could do it however you want there, but it was just insane. You don't need it. At least I didn't. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts. I wanted to take an extra day to get some extra sleep from traveling to and from the event, collect my thoughts, get everything together, and just be able to share it with you all nice and clean. But that's it for the deck. That was it for the second episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 365. We have a few other events on the horizon. We have an OTS championship in a couple of weeks. Then a couple of weeks after that, we have the Ohio Regional. And then a few weeks after that, we have the Indianapolis YCS, with Age of Overlord being officially released the day before. So stay tuned if we can actually get all that stuff to make this deck happen. So thank you all so for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Later.